Okay, you need to understand, and everyone needs to understand, that before any type of medication is given to trans people for transitioning, there's mountains of research of that medication working for cis people. So when we talk about progesterone, when we talk about all of the other anti-androgens that are out there, these are things that are already being used for cis people, and there's already mountains of evidence. Not only that, but there's also some specific studies for trans women that say that it works. So when you have tons of stories from tons of trans women saying the same thing, when you have all of this background data on cis people saying the same thing, and then you have a small selection of samples saying that the same is true for trans women, it's not just anecdotal. There is actually peer-reviewed research that supports this. It's just that people don't want to believe trans women when it comes to our own healthcare. This is just medical transmisogyny, medical transphobia. That's what's happening. It's medical sexism.
Okay. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Ray. I am a detransition male. That was Bennie Carollo, who is a trans activist, used to work on the Young Turk show until she quit because of alleged, transphobia. The other host had become too transphobic, apparently, even though they basically just said that, letting biological males play sports with females is, going too far. But apparently that's transphobic. You can't say that. So Benny quit out of protest. And I think there are some other things that were alleged to be transphobic. But anyway, in this video, Benny talks about gender affirming care for trans women, and says that the fact that people are skeptical about its safety and efficacy in trans women is an instance of medical sexism because it's prescribed for all these other use cases in cis people, aka non-trans people. So therefore, it's transphobic, or it's transmisogyny, or it's medical sexism to sort of say that, well, there's no evidence that these drugs are safe because look, they're used and prescribed for cis people for all these other reasons. But when they're prescribed to trans people, to trans women, for gender affirming purposes, suddenly everyone's skeptical and saying there's no evidence that these things are safe. So take the drug spironolactone, which is a commonly prescribed anti-androgen. So it kills your testosterone. It's prescribed to trans women as part of hormone replacement therapy. And non-trans people, spironolactone is it's a potassium-sparing diuretic that is often used to treat heart failure, high blood pressure, fluid retention, low potassium levels, aldosterone regulation. So these drugs that are used as part of gender affirming care for trans women are also used in other medical cases to treat physical diseases. But the key thing that makes a disanalogy with gender affirming care and how these drugs are prescribed in other instances in the medical field is, with gender affirming care, it's not really medical healthcare in the way that you're treating for high blood pressure. Because when you're treating for high blood pressure, you're treating a physiological aspect of the body that's mechanical in some degree or another. That's much more straightforward. You can sort of analyze the problem at the level of simple biological biochemical mechanisms. So you can look at how the spironolactone is going to either increase or decrease the blood pressure. It's objective, it's physiological, it's empirical, it can be measured. But when you're dealing with trans women and this desire to feminize the body as purported healthcare, and thinking that this is equivalent to giving spironolactone for high blood pressure, it's not the same, because gender affirming care for trans women is quintessentially a psychiatric intervention in order to treat a sexual problem, at least in the case of the trans women who are autogynephilic, which is the majority of trans women who are seeking out these medical interventions. So you have essentially a disordered sexual orientation of some kind. You have a paraphilia, you have a sort of distortion or disordered sexual orientation. And, you can maybe make some argument that this is, a benign natural variation in terms of, this orientation, developing this paraphilic, variation or whatever. But to me, there is clear evidence that this thing, autogynephilia, as a psychiatric condition, it is a disorder. It is a bad thing. All things considered, you do not want that because it makes your life hard. It makes your life hard. It causes psychiatric issues. And this is a mental thing. And now a lot of people are going to jump in here and say that this distinction between mental health care, psychiatric health care, and the physiological, medical sciences is like an arbitrary distinction because, the brain, is itself a physical organ. So, ultimately all, psychiatric issues are physiological medical issues. And that to say that mental health care is somehow different is, due to some sort of like mind body Cartesian dualism or something like this. But I don't think we are quite there yet in terms of the neuroscience of psychiatry, such that we can successfully reduce these complex psychiatric issues, such as autogynephilia and gender dysphoria for trans women. These psychiatric issues, for example, anorexia, like obviously anorexia is a psychiatric issue, and insofar as psychiatric issues are correlated with brain malfunction to some degree, disorders in the brain regulation, the functioning of the brain goes awry to some degree, it sort of goes off kilt from normal functioning, that introduces psychosocial problems into your life that are that are bad for you. But it's not really the case that we can treat anorexia the same way we treat high blood pressure. High blood pressure, it's very mechanical. There's a clear mechanistic story that you can tell in terms of you change this, chemical here, it causes this molecular pathway to go down. We can map it out at the biochemical mechanical level. But when you're dealing with these complex psychiatric issues, it is inevitably fuzzy to some degree because we're dealing with matters of consciousness, dealing with matters of the mind, of subjectivity, of how we perceive ourselves, these sort of psychological dimensions of our reality as human beings, as persons. And personally, I'm not a complete physical reductionist. I do not think that the realm of psychology, the realm of the psyche, the soul, consciousness, I don't think that can be fully reducible to pure physical mechanisms. I think that to some degree or another, consciousness has to be dealt with at an independent ontological level. That is a separate ontological reality that is not fully reducible to the physical world. So when we're dealing with psychiatric issues with self-consciousness, we are dealing with a fundamentally different ontological level of reality. So this is why psychiatric issues of, perception and consciousness and the narratives that we tell ourselves, while there is sort of a underlying, correlated neurobiological mechanisms behind all this, I don't think it's so clear cut to reduce this. And so I do think it makes sense to have a principal distinction between a psychological problem and a physiological problem in the way that high blood pressure is a physical problem. I do not think we are ever going to reduce these psychological psychiatric problems to the level of mechanism in the way that we've reduced the medical problem of high blood pressure to physiology. So when Bennie says that we have these mountains of evidence showing that these medications work for cis people, they work for cis people in the context of physiological mechanical medicine, which is not the same thing as giving a treatment when your physical body is perfectly healthy. And it's only your mind that is, going awry to some degree or another. Because when you're looking at the evidence for a piece of medication in regards to whether or not it is efficacious as a treatment, you have to fundamentally think about what the medication is being used to treat. So, depending on the condition that is being treated, the the like safety and efficacy of the medication has to be compared with that diagnostic of what you're treating, kept in mind. So, for example, let's say spironolactone, it's like treated for, or it's prescribed for all these, conditions like high blood pressure and like fluid retention, all these things. And, it has a pretty good safety toleration profile. So the benefits of the medication in terms of treating these physiological conditions, which if they're not untreated, it will cause problems, potentially leading to serious physical injuries such as death. Um, the benefits of the medical treatment outweigh the side effects, because every medication has side effects and costs. But with a psychiatric issue such as gender dysphoria or autogynephilia, which is a medical condition, it is a psychiatric condition. It is a sexological psychiatric condition of a disordered paraphilia that causes you to basically become attracted to wanting to live out this life as a female. And like that issue, it cannot be evaluated medically speaking in the same way we're evaluating spironolactone. Because if you're giving a physically healthy person, so their physiology in their body is perfectly fine, such that if you didn't give them this medication, they're not going to die of a heart attack, their kidneys aren't going to fail, they would, so long as they are physically healthy, they would continue to live a long life. It's just like psychologically, psychiatrically, there's a sort of there's like an issue at the level of consciousness, a issue at the level of subjectivity, of not being happy with yourself to some degree or another. And so you're giving this drug to a perfectly physically healthy person, and then you can't use the evidence of the safety profile for treating physiological diseases, and use that safety profile to say that it is perfectly efficacious as a treatment in the case of treating a sexual condition, a paraphilic condition, a disordered paraphilia that causes such distress in your life that you're no longer able to function as a member of your normal natal sex, and integrate your reality as your natal sex into your self-concept such that you can function normally as your natal sex. It creates this disordered psychiatric dysmorphia, such that you are perceiving your natal sex and finding that to be wrong, even though there's nothing physically wrong with you. So this is a self-perception issue. You are perceiving yourself wrong. You are perceiving your healthy body and saying like, no, this healthy body is somehow disordered and wrong, even though there's nothing physically wrong with you. You don't have high blood pressure. There's nothing mechanically wrong with your body. Your body is functioning perfectly normal, and yet you're saying that this perfectly normal, physically healthy body is diseased in some way. Trans women often talk about testosterone as a poison, but testosterone is not a poison. It is a perfectly healthy thing that is necessary for normal, healthy physical function. So what's healthy and normal is to not think of your normal hormonal functioning as a poison. When you think that your own perfectly physically healthy body is poisoning you, that is a sign that you have a psychiatric issue. So you can't look at the safety profile for these drugs being used in non-trans people for physiological health conditions and say that, oh, well, that means that it's going to be a perfect treatment in the case of gender affirming care, because you're treating it for a fundamentally different reason. Now, I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying that these drugs are not an effective treatment for autogynephilia, because I actually do think that spironolactone can be a effective treatment for the psychiatric disease, which is autogynephilia, because it nukes the libido. And because it's the libido that is the source of all your problems, like psychologically. When you reduce your libido, you no longer suffer from these crippling thoughts that arise from your disordered sexuality that are causing you to develop this like attraction, this like obsessive compulsive desire to embody the opposite sex in some way or another. Um, and so by killing your libido, those thoughts that are torturing you psychologically are able to be alleviated, such that you're no longer tortured by this obsessive sexual fantasy, and you're able to just live your life and not have these fantasies and thoughts take over your life. Because essentially, when you take HRT, you sort of like habituate yourself to the stimulus of that sexual fantasy constantly. Because when your body is you know when you embody the thing you desire, if you desire to feminize yourself, if you have this sexual need, this sexual desire for feminization, when you take the hormones, that's sort of a signal to your mind saying like, look, I'm giving you the thing you want, I'm feminizing you. Your mind can sort of rest content. And then because you don't have the testosterone pumping through you, you become your libido diminishes, and you also get habituated to the stimulus of the feminization, such that you sort of like it like doesn't become as stimulating, and so it doesn't drive you into these obsessive like sexual compulsions or whatever, and you're able to like stop obsessing and just like live a more normal well-adjusted life into society, working your job, spending time with your family, etc. Developing hobbies, and being like a normal well-functioning, well-adjusted person. So I'm not saying that autogynephilia can't be treated with things like spironolactone, but it is fundamentally disingenuous to compare that to taking spironolactone for like high blood pressure. You're taking spironolactone to deal with a issue at the libido, at the psychological, psychiatric, sexological nature. You're dealing with a problem of self-perception, of it is a disordered sexuality, essentially. So that's like what I wanted to say for this video. I just wanted to sort of say that this, we need to be honest about what we're doing when we're treating autogynephilia. We're not engaging in like regular healthcare. We're not, we're not treating cancer here. We're not treating high blood pressure. We're treating a psychiatric disordered sexual orientation, and that disordered sexual orientation causes a lot of distress unless you deal with these, misaligned libidinal energies to some degree or another. You have to deal with the libidinal energies. You have to direct them into something useful or functional, such that they don't take over your life and prevent you from normal psychosocial functioning. So you can redirect the energies by diminishing the force of the energy, by killing your testosterone, by nuking your libido. And so that just allows you to be more functioning, because you're not obsessed about all this stuff anymore. Which is not to say that, transition is always the preferable pathway. It's just that because this sexual condition, it's very hard to deal with. And a lot of AGPs like just feel like nuking their libido is like the last like resort. Like they can't think of anything else to deal with it, because without that nuking of the libido, it just becomes psychologically torturous to live with these feelings, these obsessive fantasies that you can never realize, and then it just sort of like drives you crazy because you can't embody the thing that you're deeply sexually and romantically attracted to, such that, and when you first give yourself the thing that your sexuality wants, it's so euphoric, it's so powerful, and it just drives you down this dopamine pathway of stimulation and reward and euphoria and endorphins, and it just creates this intoxicating feeling, this intoxicating euphoric feeling. It's like a high on drugs. It's like you're on a first date and you're giddy and you're in love, and it's just these powerful emotional sexual erotic energies, and you just become addicted to that. But then you become habituated to it, and you eventually kill your libido, and that libidinal energy sort of diminishes, and you're able to focus on your life, which is why transition often can improve psychosocial functioning. But we need to be honest about what we're doing. We're treating a sexual condition, which is different than treating high blood pressure. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.